The floorboards creaked at 11:47 p.m. I knew because I'd been staring at the ceiling for the past 2 hours, unable to sleep when I heard it. That distinctive groan of the third step from the top, the one I'd been meaning to fix for months, the one that always gave away midnight snack raids and bathroom trips. But this wasn't either of those things. I held my breath in the darkness of my bedroom, listening. My wife Sarah slept peacefully beside me, her gentle breathing a stark contrast to the thundering of my heart. Another creak, then another. Someone was deliberately trying to be quiet, which only made the sounds more pronounced in the silent house. Ethan. My son, my 17-year-old son, was sneaking out of the house. This wasn't the first time. For the past 3 weeks I'd noticed the pattern, the late-night disappearances, the way he'd return sometime before dawn, slipping back into his room like a ghost, the exhaustion shadowing his eyes at breakfast, the distant, distracted way he'd push food around his plate, lost in thoughts he wouldn't share. At first, I told myself it was nothing, teenage rebellion. Maybe he was meeting friends, doing the stupid, harmless things kids do when they think they're invincible. I'd been young once too. I understood the allure of freedom, of breaking rules just to prove you could. But 3 weeks of this, 3 weeks of watching my son transform from the bright, open kid I'd raised into someone secretive and hollow-eyed. That wasn't harmless teenage rebellion, that was something else entirely. The front door closed with a soft click. I sat up in bed, my mind racing. Every parental instinct screamed at me to go after him, to demand answers, to drag him back inside and ground him until he was 30. But another part of me, the part that remembered being 17 and suffocating under the weight of expectations, knew that confrontation would only push him further away. Sarah stirred beside me. "Michael, what's wrong?" "Nothing," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "Go back to sleep." She mumbled something incoherent and rolled over, already drifting off again. Sarah had always been a deep sleeper, a trait I'd envied until tonight. Tonight I was grateful she couldn't hear what I heard, couldn't feel the way the house seemed to hold its breath in Ethan's absence. I waited 5 minutes, then 10, then I made a decision that would change everything. I got dressed in the dark, pulling on jeans and a hoodie. My phone went into my pocket. My car keys stayed on the nightstand. Starting the engine would wake the whole neighborhood. Instead, I grabbed the spare set for Sarah's sedan, parked on the street. By the time I made it outside, Ethan was already a block away, his silhouette barely visible under the streetlights. He walked with his hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched against the October chill. There was something defeated in his posture, something that made my chest ache with worry. I followed at a distance, keeping to the shadows. Our suburban neighborhood slept around us, houses dark except for the occasional porch light. Ethan's path took him toward the main road, away from the direction of his school, his best friend Marcus's house, or any of the usual teenage hangouts. He wasn't going anywhere I recognized. 20 minutes of walking brought us to the edge of town, where the neat suburban homes gave way to older buildings and independent shops. A vintage record store. A coffee shop that doubled as an art gallery. The kind of place that catered to artists, students, and people who didn't quite fit into the cookie-cutter mold of our planned community. Ethan stopped in front of a building I'd never noticed before, a converted warehouse with exposed brick and large windows currently dark. He pulled out his phone, the screen's glow illuminating his face. In that brief light, I saw something that stopped my heart. Hope, nervous, fragile, desperate hope. He was waiting for someone. I ducked into the recessed doorway of a closed bookstore across the street, my breath fogging in the cold air. My hands trembled, though I couldn't tell if it was from the temperature or fear of what I was about to discover. Minutes passed, 5, 10, 15. Then, emerging from the darkness like an answer to a question I didn't know Ethan had asked, came a figure. Tall, lean, moving with easy confidence. As he stepped under a streetlight, I could make out details, probably early 20s, dark hair, wearing a leather jacket and carrying what looked like a guitar case. My son's face transformed when he saw him. I'd seen Ethan happy before, I'd seen him excited, joyful, animated, but this was something else entirely. This was the way Sarah had looked at me on our wedding day. This was the expression of someone seeing their whole world walking toward them. The young man reached Ethan and they stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Even from across the street I could feel the electricity between them, the way the air itself seemed to change. Then the young man said something and Ethan laughed, A real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from him in months, and they started walking together, disappearing around the corner. I followed. They walked for another 10 minutes, their heads bent close together, talking in voices too low for me to hear. At one point, the young man's hand brushed against Ethan's and my son flinched, not away but toward the touch like a plant reaching for sunlight. My throat tightened. They stopped at another building, this one with a neon sign that read "The Underground" in purple script. A music venue, I realized, nodding the posters plastered on the walls advertising various bands and open mic nights. The young man produced a key and unlocked a side door, gesturing for Ethan to go in first. I waited 30 seconds, then crossed the street. The door hadn't latched completely, and I could hear their voices echoing in what must have been a stairwell. "Can't believe you actually came," the young man was saying, his voice warm and rich. "I told you I would," Ethan replied, and there was something in his tone, a vulnerability I'd never heard before. "I keep my promises, Alex." Alex, the stranger, had a name now. "I know you do," Alex said softly. It's one of the things I really like about you." Silence, then footsteps ascending stairs. I shouldn't have followed them inside, I knew that, but my feet moved anyway, pulling the door open just enough to slip through. The stairwell was dimly lit, smelling of old wood and cigarette smoke. I climbed carefully, keeping to the edges where the steps wouldn't creak. The stairs led to a loft space above the venue, a converted storage area that someone had transformed into what looked like a makeshift music studio. I could see it through a crack in the door at the top. Mismatched furniture, music equipment, strings of fairy lights casting everything in a warm glow. And in the center of it all, Ethan and Alex. They sat on an old couch, close but not touching, like there was an invisible force field between them that neither knew how to cross. "Did you bring it?" Alex asked. Ethan pulled a notebook from his backpack, the same battered composition book I'd seen him writing in obsessively for the past few months. He'd always been secretive about it, clutching it to his chest whenever anyone came near. "I'm nervous," Ethan admitted. "What if it's terrible?" "It won't be terrible," Alex said firmly, "but even if it is, which it won't be, I want to hear it. I want to hear everything you have to say." My son took a deep breath, opened the notebook, and began to read. I couldn't hear every word through the crack in the door, but I heard enough. Ethan's voice, usually so controlled and measured, trembled with emotion as he read. He was sharing poetry, raw, honest, beautiful poetry about feeling different, about being afraid, about wanting something he'd been taught to hide. About being in love with someone he wasn't supposed to love. Alex listened with complete attention, his eyes never leaving Ethan's face. When my son finished, his voice breaking on the last line, Alex was quiet for a long moment. "Ethan," he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "That was God, that was incredible. Do you understand how brave you are, how much courage it takes to write something like that?" "I don't feel brave," Ethan whispered. "I feel terrified all the time." "Terrified of what?" "Of everything, of my parents finding out, of kids at school figuring it out. Of you realizing I'm just some stupid kid with a crush and—" "Stop," Alex interrupted gently. He shifted closer on the couch and I saw him take Ethan's hand. My son stared down at their interlaced fingers like he couldn't quite believe they were real. "You're not stupid, and this isn't just some crush, not for me." Ethan's head snapped up. "What?" "I mean it," Alex said. "I've been trying to keep things appropriate, trying to remember that you're still in high school and I'm 23 and there's all these reasons we should probably just be friends. But Ethan, when you read your poetry, when you talk about music, when you laugh at my terrible jokes, I can't pretend I don't feel something real." My son's eyes filled with tears. "My dad would lose his mind if he knew I was here, if he knew about you, about me." "Your dad seems like a good guy," Alex offered carefully. "He is," Ethan said, and the certainty in his voice made my heart crack. "That's what makes it so hard. He's a good dad, he's supportive and kind, and he's always been there for me. But this, being gay, I don't think he's ready for that. I don't think he'd understand." "I'm right here," I wanted to shout. "I'm listening, try me." But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only stand frozen in the stairwell as my son laid bare every fear, every secret, every piece of himself he'd been hiding. "You don't give him enough credit," Alex said quietly. "Parents surprise you sometimes." "Maybe," Ethan said, but he didn't sound convinced. Or maybe I tell him and everything changes, maybe he looks at me differently, maybe he's disappointed, maybe his voice broke, maybe he stops loving me. That won't happen. You don't know that. You're right, Alex acknowledged. I don't, but I know that real love doesn't work like that. Real love doesn't come with conditions. Then you don't know my world, Ethan said bitterly. You don't know what it's like at my school in my neighborhood. Everyone's so perfect, so normal. Two-parent households and college plans and expectations everywhere you turn. There's no room for someone like me. Someone like you, Alex challenged. You mean someone brilliant, someone creative and kind and brave enough to sneak out every night just to be himself for a few hours. Someone broken, Ethan corrected softly. You're not broken. Then why do I feel like I'm constantly hiding? Why do I feel like I'm lying just by existing? Alex pulled Ethan into a hug and my son collapsed against him like a puppet with cut strings. His shoulders shook with silent sobs and Alex just held him, one hand stroking his hair, murmuring words I couldn't quite make out. I'd never felt more like a failure as a father. How had I missed this? How had I not seen the pain my son was carrying, the weight of secrets crushing him a little more each day? I'd been so focused on the surface, grades, college applications, making sure he was on track for success, that I'd completely missed the fact that he was drowning. After what felt like an eternity, Ethan pulled back, wiping at his eyes. Sorry, I didn't mean to fall apart like that. Don't apologize, Alex said firmly, not for feeling, not ever. I should go, Ethan said reluctantly, checking his phone. It's almost 2, if I'm not back before my dad does his early morning run, he'll notice. They stood and for a moment they just looked at each other. Then Alex cupped Ethan's face gently, his thumb brushing away a remaining tear. You're going to be okay, he said. I promise you, Ethan, one day you're going to live in a world where you don't have to hide, where you can be exactly who you are and it will be enough, more than enough. Will you be in that world? Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. If you'll have me, Alex replied, and then he leaned in and kissed him. It was gentle, tender, the kind of first kiss that romance novels try to capture and always fall short. My son's hands came up to grip Alex's jacket, and for those few seconds he looked peaceful in a way I'd never seen before. When they pulled apart, both were smiling through tears. I backed down the stairs as quietly as I could, my own tears blurring the steps. By the time I made it outside, I was running, putting distance between myself and the truth I'd just witnessed. I made it 3 blocks before I had to stop, bracing myself against a brick wall, gasping for air. My son was gay. My son was in love. My son was suffering, and he thought I couldn't handle the truth. The worst part, he was right to be afraid, not because I didn't love him, God, I loved him more than my own life, but because I'd created an environment where he felt he had to hide. I'd been so focused on raising him right, on preparing him for a successful future, that I'd never stopped to ask if the future I envisioned was the one he wanted. I'd never told him it was okay to be different. I'd never said the words that might have made him feel safe. And now he was sneaking out in the middle of the night just to be himself, just to spend time with someone who saw him, really saw him, in a way his own father apparently couldn't. I waited in Sarah's car until I saw Ethan heading home, then gave him a 5-minute head start. When I slipped back into bed, my wife stirred. Where were you? She mumbled sleepily. Couldn't sleep, I said, which was true, went for a walk. She hummed and drifted off again. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. The next week was torture. I moved through the motions of normal life, work, dinner, helping Ethan with college applications, while carrying the weight of what I knew. Every interaction felt like walking through a minefield. Every casual "how was your day?" felt like a lie by omission. I watched Ethan at breakfast, nodding the dark circles under his eyes, the way he'd check his phone with a small, secret smile before quickly hiding it. I saw him in the evenings, disappearing into his room with that notebook, filling pages with words he thought no one would ever see. I watched and I said nothing. Sarah noticed my distraction. You've been quiet lately, she said one night after Ethan had gone to bed. We were in the living room, her reading a book while I pretended to watch television. Is everything okay at work? Work's fine, I said automatically. Michael, she set down her book, giving me her full attention. I've been married to you for 20 years, I know when something's bothering you. I almost told her, the words were right there, pressing against my teeth, desperate to escape. But how did I explain that I'd followed our son, that I'd spied on him during what was clearly meant to be a private moment? It's Ethan, I said carefully. Have you noticed anything different about him lately? Sarah frowned thoughtfully. He does seem more stressed than usual, but senior year is a lot of pressure. College applications, maintaining his grades, all of that. Right, I said, that's probably it. But it wasn't, and we both knew it. The question was whether Sarah was choosing to ignore the signs or if she genuinely couldn't see what was right in front of us. That night, I heard the floorboards creak again at 11:43 p.m. This time, I didn't follow. Instead, I went downstairs to the kitchen and made coffee I didn't want, sitting at the table in the dark. I thought about Alex, about the way he'd looked at my son with such tenderness, such respect, about how he'd encouraged Ethan to be brave, to believe in himself. I thought about the fact that a 23-year-old stranger was giving my son the support he should have been getting from his own father. At 3:17 a.m., I heard the front door open and close, soft footsteps in the hallway, a pause outside the kitchen. Dad. Ethan stood in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, his hair mussed from the wind. His eyes widened when he saw me sitting there. Couldn't sleep, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Want some coffee? He hesitated, clearly calculating whether to run or stay. Stay one out. He dropped his backpack by the door and slid into the chair across from me. I know you've been sneaking out, I said quietly. The color drained from his face. Dad, I can explain. I don't need an explanation, I interrupted. I just need to know you're safe, that whoever you're seeing, wherever you're going, you're being smart about it. I'm safe, he said quickly, too quickly. I promise I'm not doing drugs or anything like that, I'm not getting into trouble. Good. We sat in silence, the moment stretching between us like a tightrope. This was my chance. This was where I could tell him I knew, that I'd seen him with Alex, that I understood. This was where I could be the father he needed. Instead, I said, you know you can talk to me, right, about anything. I know, Ethan said, and it was clear he didn't believe it. I mean it, son, anything. There's nothing you could tell me that would change how much I love you. His eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back. Thanks, Dad, he stood abruptly. I should get to bed, school tomorrow. And just like that, the moment was gone. He grabbed his backpack and headed for the stairs, leaving me alone in the kitchen with my cold coffee and my cowardice. I'd given him the opening and he hadn't taken it, because words are cheap, because I'd said you can talk to me about anything but hadn't backed it up with actions, hadn't created a space where he felt genuinely safe bringing his truth. The following days fell into a painful routine. Ethan would sneak out. I would lie awake listening. We'd maintain our careful distance during the day, both pretending everything was normal while the unspoken truth festered between us. I started paying more attention to the little things, the way Ethan would tense whenever conversations at dinner turned to dating, the way he'd deflect when his mother asked if he was taking anyone to homecoming, the careful neutrality he maintained when his friends talked about girls. He was so good at hiding, too good. And I realized that this wasn't new, he'd probably been doing this for years, perfecting the art of being invisible in plain sight. How much practice did it take to become that skilled at lying by omission? How many times had he wanted to tell us and swallowed the words instead? Thursday night, I followed him again. I told myself I wouldn't, told myself it was an invasion of privacy, that I needed to trust him. But worry won out over wisdom and I found myself trailing behind him through the dark streets, keeping to the shadows. This time, his path was different. Instead of heading to Alex's studio, Ethan walked to a park on the edge of town, a place with trails and a pond, mostly deserted at night. I hung back, watching as he sat on a bench overlooking the water, pulling out his notebook. He didn't write, he just sat there, staring at the blank pages like they held answers he couldn't quite reach. 20 minutes passed, then a voice emerged from the darkness. Rough night. I recognized Alex immediately, even before he stepped into the glow of the park lights. He had 2 cups of what smelled like hot chocolate and offered one to Ethan, who accepted it gratefully. Just thinking, Ethan said. About how much longer I can keep doing this, sneaking around, lying to my parents. He took a sip of his drink. They're good people, Alex, they don't deserve this. You're not doing anything wrong, Alex said firmly, sitting beside him. Aren't I? I'm deceiving them every single day. Every time my mom asks if I have a girlfriend, every time my dad tries to give me advice about dating, I'm lying to them. You're protecting yourself, Alex corrected, that's different. Is it? Ethan's voice cracked. Sometimes I think I should just tell them, rip the band-aid off, deal with the fallout, but then I imagine my dad's face when I say the words and I can't. What do you think he'd do? I don't know, that's what scares me. Ethan set down his cup, wrapping his arms around himself. Best case scenario, he needs time to process. Things are awkward for a while, but eventually we find our way back to normal. Worst case, he sees me as a stranger, someone he doesn't recognize, someone who disappointed him. And you think the worst case is more likely? I don't know what to think anymore, Ethan admitted. He's been acting weird lately, watching me more, asking these careful questions. I think he suspects something, but he's not pushing. And that almost makes it worse because I don't know if he's giving me space to come out on my own terms or if he's in denial, hoping whatever he's seeing will just go away. Every word was a knife to my heart. Alex was quiet for a moment, then said, "Can I tell you something about my own coming out?" Ethan nodded. I was 20, in college. I'd known for years, but I kept telling myself I'd tell my parents later when I was ready, when the time was right. But the thing is, there's never a perfect time, so one day I just said it, sitting at the dinner table completely out of the blue, I'm gay. What happened? My dad didn't speak to me for 3 months. Ethan's face fell. God, Alex, I'm sorry. Wait, let me finish, Alex said. Those 3 months were hell, but then slowly he started coming around. Started asking questions, started trying to understand. It took time, but eventually we rebuilt our relationship. Different than before, but in some ways stronger, because it was based on truth instead of assumptions. What if my dad can't come around? Ethan asked quietly. Then that's his loss, Alex said firmly. But you can't keep living your life based on what other people might think or feel. At some point you have to choose yourself, choose your own happiness. I'm 17, I still live at home. I can't just choose myself, I'm dependent on them for everything. I know, and I'm not saying you have to come out tomorrow, I'm just saying you should start thinking about what you want your life to look like, not just now but in a year, 5 years, 10 years. Do you want to still be hiding, still sneaking around? No, Ethan said immediately. God no, he stopped, swallowing hard. I want what everyone else gets to want without thinking twice about it. I want to hold hands with someone I care about in public. I want to bring someone home for dinner and not have it be this big dramatic thing. I want my parents to ask about my partner and actually mean the person I'm dating, not just assume it's a girl because that's easier for them. Then start working toward that, Alex said gently, even if it's just small steps, even if it takes time. They sat together in comfortable silence and I watched from the shadows, my heart breaking and mending and breaking again. This was my son, brave and scared, hopeful and heartbroken, trying so hard to be true to himself while terrified of the cost. And I was the cost he was afraid to pay. Friday morning, everything came to a head. I was in the kitchen making breakfast when Sarah came downstairs, her face pale, holding something in her hand. Ethan's notebook. I found this in his room, she said, her voice shaking. I was putting away laundry and it fell off his desk and it opened to Michael, you need to read this. She handed it to me. I didn't want to take it, didn't want to violate his privacy any more than I already had, but Sarah was looking at me with such confusion and worry that I couldn't refuse. The page she'd opened to contained a poem, beautiful, heartbreaking, and absolutely clear about what it described. I trace the ghost of your touch on my skin in the dark where no one knows to look, where I can be the person I am instead of the son they think they raised. You ask if I'm afraid of loving you, but fear is all I've ever known, afraid of my own reflection, afraid of the truth I carry like a stone. So yes, I'm terrified of my father's disappointed eyes, of my mother's careful questions, of the moment when love dies. But when you hold me in the darkness, when you say my name like prayer, I remember what it feels like to breathe untainted air. The poem continued, but I couldn't read anymore. My vision was blurred with tears. Is our son gay? Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, I said, because there was no point in denying it anymore. How long have you known? A week, maybe a little more. And you didn't tell me. I didn't know how, I admitted. I found out by accident. He doesn't know that I know. Sarah sank into a chair, still holding the notebook like it might combust. All this time I don't know what I thought, that he was just focused on school, that he wasn't interested in dating yet. I never considered. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. How did we miss this? He didn't want us to see it, I said gently. He's been hiding it probably for a long time. But why? Why wouldn't he tell us? We're his parents, we love him. He's afraid, I said. Afraid we'll be disappointed, afraid we won't accept him, afraid that everything will change. Of course things will change, Sarah said, and my heart sank until she continued. Because now we know he's been suffering alone, now we know he's been carrying this burden by himself. That changes everything. She stood abruptly and I thought she was going to march upstairs to confront Ethan. Instead, she went to the window, staring out at the backyard where our son used to play as a child. I need you to tell me everything, she said, how you found out what you know, all of it. So I did. I told her about following Ethan, about Alex, about the studio and the poetry and the midnight meetings in the park. I told her about the fear in our son's eyes when he talked about us finding out, about how he thought we'd stop loving him. When I finished, Sarah was crying silently. We did this, she said. We made him feel like he couldn't trust us. No, I said firmly. Society did this. The world that tells kids like Ethan that there's something wrong with them did this. We didn't fight hard enough against it. Yeah. So what do we do now? Before I could answer, we heard footsteps on the stairs. Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed for school, and froze when he saw his notebook in his mother's hands. Ethan, Sarah started, but he was already backing away. Did you read it? He asked, his voice high and tight with panic. Did you read my private notebook? Sweetheart, it fell open to exactly the page that would out me. Ethan's laugh was bitter, broken. Right, sure. Ethan, please, I reached for him, but he flinched away. How much did you read? He demanded. Just that one page, or did you flip through? Did you get a good look at all my secrets? We're not trying to invade your privacy, I said. We're worried about you. Worried about me or worried about who I am? He shot back. Because there's a difference. Ethan, we love you, Sarah began. Don't, his voice cracked. Don't say that like it's supposed to fix everything. Like those words mean anything when you've been snooping through my things, reading my most private thoughts. It was an accident, Sarah insisted. I swear to you it fell and you just couldn't help but read it? Ethan's eyes were wet with angry tears. You just had to see what your son was hiding. Well, congratulations, now you know I'm gay. There it is, the big secret that's been eating me alive. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. We know, I said quietly, and it doesn't change anything. Everything changes? Ethan shouted. You can't look at me the same way, you can't think about my future the same way. Every conversation we've ever had about who I'd marry someday, what kind of family I'd have, all of that was based on a lie because you assumed I was straight. You assumed I was normal. You are normal, Sarah said fiercely. Being gay doesn't make you abnormal or wrong or. Then why are you crying? Ethan challenged. If this is so normal and fine, why do you both look like someone died? I didn't have an answer for that, because he was right, we were grieving. Not for who he was, but for the assumptions we'd held, for the easier path we'd imagined for him, for our own failure to create a space where he felt safe. I'm crying because you were afraid to tell us, Sarah said, her voice breaking. I'm crying because my baby has been hurting and I didn't know, because you've been sneaking out in the middle of the night just to be yourself, and that breaks my heart. Wait, Ethan said, his face going pale. How did you know about? He turned to me and understanding dawned in his eyes. You followed me, oh my God, you followed me. I was worried, I said. You were disappearing every night and I needed to know you were safe. So you spied on me? You violated my privacy, my trust just because you were worried? He laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Do you have any idea how creepy that is, how controlling? I was trying to protect you. From what? Ethan demanded. From being happy, from finding someone who actually accepts me, from having a few hours where I don't have to pretend. From getting hurt, I said, from making choices you might regret. The only thing I regret is trusting that you'd respect my boundaries, that you'd let me come to you when I was ready. And when would that have been? The question came out sharper than I intended. You've been hiding this for how long? Months? Years? When were you planning to tell us? Maybe never, Ethan shouted. Maybe I was planning to wait until college, until I was financially independent, until I didn't have to worry about whether you'd still pay my tuition if you found out the truth. Did that ever occur to you, that I might have been protecting myself? Protecting yourself from us? Sarah asked, wounded. We're your parents, we love you. Yeah, you love the version of me you think you know, Ethan said bitterly. The straight son who'd give you grandkids and a nice daughter-in-law and a normal, acceptable life. But this version, he gestured to himself, the real me, I'm not so sure you're ready for that. That's not fair, I said. Isn't it, Dad? You followed me like I was some kind of criminal. You spied on me with Alex. You saw, his voice caught. You saw something private and intimate and you didn't say anything. You just kept watching, kept lying to my face every morning at breakfast. If you really accepted this, you would have talked to me. You would have told me what you saw and given me a chance to explain. He was right, God help me, he was absolutely right. I was scared, I admitted. I didn't know what to say, I didn't know how to. How to deal with having a gay son, Ethan finished. Yeah, I know, that's why I didn't tell you. He grabbed his backpack from where he dropped it, moving toward the front door. Ethan, wait, Sarah called, we need to talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, he said, not looking back. You read my private thoughts, you spied on me, you know the truth now, what else is there to say? Everything, I said desperately. There's everything to say about how we're sorry, about how we're going to do better, about how much we love you no matter what. He paused at the door, his hand on the knob. I have a calc test today, I can't deal with this right now. Then when? Sarah asked, when can we talk about this? I don't know, Mom, maybe when I'm ready, maybe when I can trust that you won't use my vulnerability against me. He opened the door, then looked back at us with such pain in his eyes that I wanted to die. Maybe when I believe that you love all of me, not just the parts that are convenient. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a terrible finality. Sarah and I stood in the kitchen, the silence deafening. She still held Ethan's notebook and she looked down at it like she wasn't sure what to do with this forbidden knowledge. We have to fix this, she said. I know. I mean really fix it, not just say the right words but show him, prove to him that we meant it when we said nothing changes. Everything changes, I said quietly. He was right about that. We can't pretend this doesn't shift our understanding of who he is, but maybe the change doesn't have to be bad, maybe it can be good, maybe we can become the parents he actually needs instead of the ones we thought we were. Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. First, we need to give him his notebook back, and we need to apologize, really apologize for reading it. Agreed. And then, she said, her voice gaining strength, we need to meet Alex. Ethan didn't come home after school. He texted at 3:30 p.m., staying at Marcus's to study, don't wait up. I knew it was a lie. Marcus's parents both worked late and their house was the go-to spot for kids who wanted unsupervised time. But more than that, I knew because of the timing, Ethan needed space and he was taking it. Sarah wanted to call him, to demand he come home so we could hash everything out, but I talked her down. He needs to process, I said. We ambushed him this morning, the least we can do is give him room to breathe. So instead, we prepared. Sarah spent the afternoon researching P-flag websites, articles about supporting LGBTQ+ teens, personal stories from parents who'd been through similar situations. She took notes like she was studying for the most important test of her life. I did something different. At 7 p.m., I drove to the Underground. The venue was hosting an open mic night. I could hear music spilling out onto the street as I approached, the sound of a folk singer's gentle guitar filtering through the walls. The main entrance led to a bar area with a small stage, already crowded with college students and artsy 20-somethings. I scanned the crowd looking for Alex. A bartender noticed my searching gaze. Help you find someone, he asked. Alex, I said, dark hair, early 20s, probably carrying a guitar case. Upstairs in the studio, the bartender said, jerking his thumb toward a door marked private. But he doesn't usually see people during open mic nights, he's picky about who. I'm Ethan's father, I interrupted. The bartender's expression shifted, surprise, then wariness, then something that might have been respect. Top of the stairs, knock first. I climbed the same stairs I'd snuck up a week ago, but this time I didn't hide. I knocked firmly on the studio door. "Come in," Alex called. He was sitting on the couch, tuning a guitar, and his welcoming expression froze when he saw me. "Mr. Harrison," he said, setting the guitar aside and standing. This is unexpected." "I'm sure it is," I said. "Can we talk?" "Does Ethan know you're here?" "No." Alex's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, sir, if Ethan wanted us to meet, he would have introduced us. Coming here without his knowledge feels like another invasion of his privacy." "You're right," I said. "It is. But I'm not here to spy or to threaten you. I'm here because I need to understand." "Understand what?" "What my son sees in you, what you mean to him, whether you're good for him or just another complication in a life that's already too complicated." Alex studied me for a long moment, then gestured to the couch. "Sit." We sat on opposite ends, the space between us charged with tension. "How did you find out about me?" Alex asked. "I followed Ethan, saw you two together, I stopped, unsure how to continue. "I saw how he looks at you like you're the answer to something he's been searching for." "And that scares you?" "Terrifies me," I admitted. "He's 17, you're 23, there's a power dynamic there that concerns me." "It concerns me too," Alex said honestly. "That's why I've been careful, that's why why we haven't." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Look, I care about Ethan a lot, but I'm not trying to take advantage of him. I'm trying to be a friend, someone he can talk to, someone who won't judge him." "He has parents for that," I said. "Does he?" Alex challenged. "Because from where I'm sitting, he's been so terrified of your judgment that he's been sneaking out in the middle of the night just to have honest conversations. That doesn't sound like a kid who feels supported at home." The words stung because they were true. "We didn't know," I said quietly, "that he was gay, that he was struggling. We missed all the signs." "Or you chose not to see them," Alex suggested gently. "Sometimes it's easier to see what we want to see, the kid who fits our expectations instead of the person who's actually there." "Is that what you think, that we're bad parents?" "No," Alex said immediately. "I think you're scared parents. I think you love Ethan and want the best for him, but you're not sure what best looks like anymore. I think you're grieving a future you'd imagined and trying to figure out how to accept a different one." "You're perceptive." "I'm in therapy," Alex said with a slight smile. "Turns out coming out and getting partially rejected by your family leaves some scars. I've had a lot of time to think about parent-child dynamics." "Your father," I remembered from the conversation I'd overheard, "he didn't take it well." "Not at first, but he came around. It took time and effort and a lot of uncomfortable conversations, but we got there." Alex leaned forward, his expression earnest. "That's what I want for Ethan, not me specifically. I know there are complications there, but I want him to have parents who accept him fully, who don't make him feel like he has to choose between being himself and being loved." "We never wanted that," I said. "I believe you, but impact matters more than intent. And right now, the impact of your actions following him, reading his private notebook, has made him feel violated and unsafe." I nodded, the weight of my mistakes settling heavy on my shoulders. "So what do I do? How do I fix this?" "You start by really listening," Alex said. "Not listening to respond or defend yourself, but listening to understand. Hear what he's been going through, acknowledge the pain, don't minimize it or try to explain it away. And then you show up consistently, you prove through actions, not just words, that you're safe, that he can be himself around you without fear." "What about you?" I asked. "What happens with you and Ethan?" Alex was quiet for a moment. "That's complicated." "Complicated how?" "I care about him," Alex said carefully. "But I'm also aware of the age gap, the power dynamics. I've been trying to be appropriate, to just be a friend and mentor. But Ethan," he stopped, choosing his words carefully. "Ethan wants more, and I'm trying to be responsible, to think about what's best for him in the long term, not just what feels good right now." "Do you love him?" I asked bluntly. Alex met my eyes. "I'm falling for him, which is why I need to be careful. Why I need to make sure that whatever happens between us, it's healthy and consensual and not based on him seeking acceptance he should be getting at home." "You're a good person," I said, surprised by my own sincerity. "Better than I gave you credit for." I'm just someone who's been where Ethan is, Alex said. I remember how alone it felt, how desperate I was for someone to see me and not flinch. I don't want that for him. We talked for another hour. Alex told me about his own coming out story, about the work he'd done to reconcile with his father, about the community he'd found in the music scene. He showed me some of Ethan's poetry. With permission, he clarified, pieces my son had shared willingly, and I saw my child's pain and hope laid bare in beautiful, heartbreaking words. When I finally left, Alex walked me to the door. For what it's worth, he said, Ethan talks about you constantly, how smart you are, how you taught him to change a tire and balance a checkbook, how you never miss his school events. He loves you, Mr. Harrison. That's why this is so hard for him, because he's terrified of losing you. He won't, I said firmly. I'll make sure of that. I drove home with a clearer sense of purpose. Sarah was waiting up and I told her everything about Alex, about their conversation, about the age gap concerns and the way Alex had handled them responsibly. He's good for Ethan, Sarah concluded, maybe not as a boyfriend right now but as a friend and mentor. Agreed. So we support it. We support Ethan, I corrected, whatever that looks like, whoever he loves, however he needs us to show up. Sarah smiled through tears. When did we get so wise? About 5 hours ago, I said, and she laughed. Ethan came home at midnight. Sarah and I were still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his notebook between us. When he walked in and saw us there, he froze. We need to talk, I said gently. I'm tired. Please, Sarah interrupted, just give us a few minutes. Ethan set down his backpack with a heavy sigh and sat in the chair farthest from us, his body language screaming defense. First, Sarah said, sliding the notebook across the table to him, we're sorry, I should never have read this. It was an accident, yes, but I should have closed it the second I realized what it was. Your privacy matters and we violated it. That was wrong. Ethan stared at the notebook but didn't take it. Second, I said, I owe you an apology too, for following you, for spying on you and Alex. I told myself I was being protective, but really I was being controlling. You're almost an adult. You deserve autonomy and trust, and I failed to give you both. Okay, Ethan said quietly, is that it? No, Sarah said. We also want you to know that we love you, all of you, exactly as you are, and we're sorry we made you feel like you couldn't tell us, that you had to hide such a fundamental part of yourself because you were afraid of our reaction. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. You don't have to say that just because you found out. We're not just saying it, I said. We mean it. Ethan, you being gay doesn't change how I see you. You're still my brilliant, creative, kind son. You're still the kid who spent 3 hours building a birdhouse in 4th grade because you wanted to make sure the birds had somewhere safe to live. You're still the person who writes poetry that makes me want to cry. You're still you. But everything's different now, Ethan whispered. Some things are different, Sarah acknowledged. We're going to have to learn new things, we're going to make mistakes, but the core of who we are as a family, that doesn't change. Our love for you doesn't change. I want to see Alex tonight, I said, and Ethan's head snapped up. You what? I went to his studio, we talked. Dad, what the hell? I needed to understand, I interrupted. I needed to know who this person was that my son trusted with secrets he couldn't tell his own father, and you know what I found? Ethan shook his head mute. I found someone who cares about you deeply, someone who's been responsible and appropriate despite his own feelings, someone who wants the best for you even if that's complicated. I paused. He's good for you, Ethan, and if he's important to you, then he's important to us. You're not going to forbid me from seeing him. No, Sarah said, but we would like to meet him properly, have him over for dinner maybe, get to know him as a person, not just a secret. He's 23, Ethan said. Isn't that going to bother you? It's something we need to discuss, I said honestly. The age gap raises questions, but Alex was very clear with me about maintaining appropriate boundaries. And more than that, whether you're seeing Alex or anyone else, we want to be involved in your life. We want to know the people who matter to you. Ethan was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. I don't understand. This morning you were reading my notebook and looking at me like I was a stranger. Now you're telling me you want to meet my boyfriend, my friend, I don't even know what to call him. What do you want to call him? Sarah asked gently. I don't know, Ethan admitted. We haven't defined it, we're figuring it out. Then that's okay too, I said. You don't have to have all the answers. You're 17, you're allowed to be figuring things out. I was so scared, Ethan whispered. Every day I was terrified you'd find out and everything would fall apart, that you'd look at me differently, that you'd be disappointed. We could never be disappointed in you, Sarah said fiercely. Disappointed in ourselves for making you feel unsafe, absolutely, but in you, never. It's going to take time, I added. For all of us, we're going to stumble through this. We're going to say the wrong things sometimes, but we're committed to learning, to doing better, to being the parents you deserve. Ethan stood abruptly and crossed to where Sarah sat. She opened her arms and he collapsed into her embrace, sobbing like he was 5 years old again. I joined them, wrapping my arms around both of them, and we stood there in our kitchen at midnight, crying and holding each other and beginning the process of healing. I love you, Ethan said, his voice muffled against Sarah's shoulder. Both of you so much. We love you too, we said in unison, and this time when we said it, there were no secrets between the words. The spring sun filtered through the windows of the underground studio, warming the space where a small group had gathered. Ethan sat on the familiar couch, his notebook open, reading a new poem to an audience of familiar faces. Alex sat beside him, their hands intertwined. Sarah and I occupied the chairs we'd pulled up, listening with rapt attention. Marcus was there too, along with two other friends from Ethan's school, Tyler and Jasmine, who'd formed an impromptu poetry appreciation group that met here every other week. The closet is not a place, Ethan read, his voice strong and clear. It's a state of constant translation, every conversation a minefield, every she a betrayal of he. Every silent moment a scream swallowed down, but freedom is finally saying him without flinching. Freedom is my father's hand on my shoulder, my mother's questions about my boyfriend. Freedom is this room, these people, this moment. Freedom is knowing that love doesn't come with asterisks. He closed the notebook and the room erupted in applause. Not just polite clapping, but genuine appreciation for the vulnerability and beauty of his words. That was incredible, Tyler said. The imagery of translation, it's so accurate. Are you submitting it to the anthology? Jasmine asked, referring to the LGBTQ plus youth literary magazine that had recently accepted 3 of Ethan's pieces. Maybe, Ethan said, looking to Alex. What do you think? I think it's some of your best work, Alex said honestly. It shows how far you've come. And he had come far, we all had. The past 6 months had been a journey of small steps and significant milestones. After that midnight kitchen conversation, we'd all committed to doing the work of rebuilding trust and creating a genuinely safe space. Sarah had joined a PFLAG chapter and dragged me along to meetings. At first, I'd felt awkward and out of place, but hearing other parents' stories, their struggles, their triumphs, their regrets, had helped me understand that we weren't alone in this. Ethan had started seeing a therapist who specialized in LGBTQ plus youth, processing years of internalized fear and shame. He'd come out to his closest friends, and while not everyone had been accepting, he'd found his people. Marcus had been particularly wonderful, immediately shifting into protective best friend mode. As for Alex, we'd handled that situation with care. After multiple family discussions, we'd all agreed that Ethan and Alex could continue their relationship, but with boundaries appropriate to the age gap. No sleepovers, regular check-ins, an understanding that Ethan's education and future came first. To his credit, Alex had embraced these guidelines without complaint. More than that, he'd become a genuine part of Ethan's support system, mentoring him musically, encouraging his writing, but always being mindful of not overstepping. And somewhere along the way, Ethan had stopped sneaking out, not because he was forbidden to see Alex, but because he didn't need to hide anymore. Alex came over for dinner. They worked on music in our living room. They went to movies and concerts like any other couple, and Ethan held his hand in public without fear. All right, I said when the applause died down. Who's hungry? There's a new Thai place down the street Sarah's been wanting to try. Can't, Marcus said regretfully. Got a date. With who? Ethan asked, perking up. Remember Tyler from student council? Marcus waggled his eyebrows, finally worked up the courage to ask him out. Wait, Ethan started. Bye, Marcus confirmed. Surprise, your coming out inspired me to do some self-reflection. Turns out I'm not as straight as I thought. The group erupted in excited chatter, everyone peppering Marcus with questions. I watched Ethan's face light up with joy for his friend, and I felt Sarah's hand slip into mine. "We did good," she whispered. "We're doing good," I corrected. "It's ongoing." Because it was, every day presented new challenges, new opportunities to show up, to listen, to learn. We'd made mistakes. I'd accidentally used girlfriend instead of boyfriend in front of extended family, and Sarah had cried the first time Ethan casually mentioned facing homophobia at school, but we'd course corrected. We'd apologized. We'd done better. As the group made plans for dinner, Tyler hung back, approaching me hesitantly. "Mr. Harrison, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "My parents don't know I'm gay," he said quietly, glancing at where Ethan and Alex were debating restaurant choices. When Ethan told you, how did you handle it? Because I'm thinking about telling mine, but I'm terrified." I looked at this scared kid, so reminiscent of my own son 6 months ago, and I chose my words carefully. "The truth is, Ethan didn't tell us. We found out and we handled it imperfectly. But if I could go back, here's what I'd want him to know: that there's no perfect way to come out, and there's no guarantee of how parents will react. But staying in the closet out of fear means living only half a life. What if they reject me?" "Then they're making a terrible mistake," I said firmly. "And I hope they come to their senses. But Tyler, you can't control their reaction. You can only control whether you're honest about who you are, and you deserve to live authentically." "Ethan's lucky," Tyler said, "to have parents like you and Mrs. Harrison." "We're the lucky ones," I corrected. "Ethan gave us a gift when he trusted us with his truth. It forced us to grow, to examine our assumptions, to become better people. I just wish he hadn't felt like he had to wait so long." Later, after we'd said goodbye to the group and were driving home with Ethan and Alex in the backseat, Sarah turned on the radio. A pop song came on, something upbeat and catchy, and Alex started singing along, exaggerating the lyrics to make Ethan laugh. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw my son's face, radiant with genuine happiness. No shadows, no fear, just joy. And I thought about that night I'd followed him, terrified and confused, convinced I was losing him to secrets I couldn't understand. I'd been right that everything would change, but I'd been wrong about what that change would mean. I hadn't lost my son, I'd found him, the real him. And in doing so, I'd found a better version of myself, one willing to question assumptions, to embrace discomfort, to love without conditions. "Dad," Ethan's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Yes." "Thank you for everything, for trying, for showing up, for," his voice caught, "for loving me enough to do the hard work." "Always," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. Because that's what real love does. It doesn't give up when things get complicated. It doesn't retreat when faced with truths that challenge comfortable assumptions. It grows, it evolves, it fights to understand and accept, even when acceptance requires fundamental change. My son had taught me that, by being brave enough to be himself, by trusting us with his vulnerability, by refusing to apologize for who he loved, he'd taught me what unconditional love actually means. And I'd spend the rest of my life proving I'd learned the lesson. As we pulled into our driveway, Ethan and Alex got out, still laughing about something. Sarah squeezed my hand. "You know what the best part is," she said. "What?" "We get to be here for all of it, his first real relationship, college, his future. We almost missed it because we were too caught up in our own expectations, but we didn't, we're here." She was right, we were here, present, engaged, finally seeing our son for who he truly was. And there was nowhere else I'd rather be.